He pulled a gun, she took down the system. Welcome to Stories Around Us, where everyday moments reveal extraordinary lessons. If you love inspiring, emotional, and socially meaningful stories, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss a journey with us. Now, let's begin. It was late afternoon in Colorado when the sun began to dip behind the Rocky Mountains, casting a warm orange hue across the sky like a soft blanket laid gently over the city. Olivia Carter sat behind the wheel of her sleek black hybrid sedan, quietly savoring a rare moment of peace. At 44, Olivia was no stranger to pressure. As the Deputy Director of the National Security Bureau, NSB, a high-level intelligence agency specializing in national threats and covert operations, she had long mastered the art of staying composed under fire. That day had been particularly grueling. A high-stakes briefing on cybersecurity threats targeting military networks had dragged on for nearly 2 extra hours. But Olivia never complained. The mission always came first. Still, tonight, she wasn't Deputy Director Carter. She was just Olivia, a woman who wanted to go home, kick off her heels, feed her loyal Labrador, and catch up on the latest episode of a true crime podcast about a bizarre murder case in Oregon. She cruised down Canyon Road, a quiet suburban stretch flanked by towering pine trees and weathered wooden fences. The neighborhood, located about 12 miles outside of Denver, was where she'd lived for over 10 years. The speedometer held steady at 35 mph, not too fast, not too slow. When she signaled for a right turn at intersection 19, she did so a full 5 seconds early. Habits like that were second nature now. When you're a Black woman in America, and especially one in a position of power, even your smallest actions are scrutinized. Olivia knew this all too well. That's when it happened. Red and blue lights suddenly flashed in her rearview mirror, cutting through the calm dusk like a siren in the night. A short blast of the patrol car's siren followed. Olivia instinctively glanced up, her brow furrowed. A police cruiser. She quickly ran through the mental checklist. Speed was within the limit. Turn signal used correctly, no erratic movement. There was no logical reason to be pulled over. She took a slow, steady breath. Olivia wasn't afraid, but she was alert. In her role at the NSB, she had read enough internal reports on racial profiling and misuse of force to know that things can spiral fast, even from the most routine stops. And this time, it wasn't someone else in the file. It was her. She flipped on the interior light and kept both hands on the wheel. Another learned habit. Part of her still hoped this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe a tail light was out, or the officer had mistaken her for someone else. But deep down, the instincts she'd honed after years of staring down threats and surviving Washington's toughest intelligence rooms whispered otherwise. This wasn't a mistake. It was the beginning of something dangerous. Not from across the ocean or inside a data server, but right here, on an American street, the kind lined with mailboxes, basketball hoops, and flower beds. A storm was brewing, and this time, it was wearing a badge. The patrol car pulled in just a single car length behind Olivia's sedan. Through the rearview mirror, she watched the driver's door open. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out young, quick in his movements, but with a gaze that radiated tension. The patrol car's headlights reflected off the silver badge on his chest. Officer Rick Monroe. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps recently promoted, with a face that still bore the softness of youth, but eyes sharpened by suspicion. Holding a high-beam flashlight, Officer Monroe shined it directly into her car. The light cut through the darkness and straight into her eyes, not as a means of safety, but control. There was no polite greeting, No introduction, no explanation for the stop, only a cold, clipped command, license and registration. Olivia tilted her head slightly, her eyes calm and unblinking, the eyes of someone who had faced down arms dealers and terrorists alike. Her voice was steady, soft, but firm. "Good evening, officer. May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" Monroe didn't answer right away. He stared at her, taking in every detail: her mid-40s face, her neatly tailored blouse, the dash-mounted phone recording everything. Then he stepped back half a pace and said flatly, "Your vehicle looks out of place." Olivia's brows knit together slightly. Out of place? She repeated the phrase to confirm she'd heard him right. She had lived in this neighborhood for over a decade. She drove this road nearly every day. Her car was fully registered, properly insured, and passed emissions and safety checks annually. There was no reason for her to be considered suspicious unless, of course, one considered her race a reason. "Officer," Olivia replied patiently, "I was driving the speed limit, used my signal at every turn, and was following all traffic laws. Can you clarify what made you consider me a threat?" Monroe's breathing quickened, like someone preparing for confrontation. He stepped closer. "You questioning me now? I don't need to justify myself. Hand over your papers. Right now." Olivia's hands remained on the steering wheel. Her purse sat beside her, within reach, but she didn't move yet. Her voice retained its composure. "With all due respect, officer, traffic stops require reasonable suspicion under the law. Out of place isn't a valid justification. Are you sure there's no other reason for pulling me over?" Monroe didn't answer. Instead, he raised his flashlight again, this time holding it longer and closer, deliberately shining it in her face. When he spoke, his tone had cooled into something icy and aggressive. "You're a stranger in a high-end neighborhood. That's all I need. Now hand me your documents or I'll get you out of that car myself." Olivia felt her heart rate rise, not from fear, but from the clarity of what this moment represented. This wasn't just a traffic stop. This was what so many others before her had faced: a police officer with unchecked authority, seeing difference as danger. She slowly retrieved her license and registration, but didn't hand them over. Instead, she held them firmly and looked him directly in the eyes. "Officer Monroe, I know my rights. I'm willing to cooperate, but only if you can provide a lawful reason for this stop. Otherwise, this feels like harassment, not law enforcement." The wind outside pushed a cool gust through the partially open window, chilling the air inside the vehicle. Streetlights lit Olivia's face from the side, highlighting the resolve in her expression. She knew this encounter could spiral in seconds, but she also knew that if she didn't stand up for herself now, no one else would. The air inside the car had turned heavy, as if tension itself had filled the space between breaths. Streetlights cast Officer Monroe's tall silhouette against the window, long, looming, and oppressive. Olivia remained still, her hands resting on the steering wheel. Outside, the man wearing a badge, a symbol meant to represent order, now stood as a threat to the very laws he swore to uphold. Monroe stepped closer, his boots crunching against the gravel with sharp, deliberate force. He leaned in toward the open window, flashlight still glaring directly into Olivia's eyes, making her squint slightly. Yet she didn't look away. Her composure, a steady calm honed from years of facing threats across continents, seemed to irritate him even more. "I'm not going to tolerate this attitude much longer," Monroe snapped. "You don't get to challenge me. I'm the one giving orders here. Either you cooperate, or I'll pull you out of this car myself. Believe me, I've done it before." That final line wasn't protocol. It was a threat pure and unfiltered. Not a caution rooted in safety, but a flex of dominance. A reminder that the badge on his chest came with power, and he was ready to misuse it. Olivia didn't respond immediately. She knew too well that every move, every word, even the angle of her eyes could be misconstrued. She'd spent years training special agents in conflict management, de-escalation techniques, and most of all, reading body language. Now she was deploying those same skills to protect herself. Her voice was measured and unwavering. I'm not refusing to cooperate, but I will not be threatened when I've done nothing wrong. You are exceeding your authority. Officer Monroe? Monroe scoffed a bitter, sharp sound. He straightened up and, with a sudden motion, slapped the doorframe with an open palm. The thud rang out in the night, echoing louder than it should have in the stillness. Olivia's shoulders tensed instinctively, but she didn't flinch. She knew this tactic provoke, unsettle, dominate, but she wasn't easily shaken. I don't need you preaching the law to me, Monroe said, his voice rising. You think you're smarter than me? I've been doing this job long enough to know who causes trouble. And I've spent enough years defending the law to know when someone's twisting it for their own bias. Olivia shot back, her eyes sharp and unwavering. I've provided my documents. I've broken no laws. You are abusing your position. Monroe gripped his flashlight tighter. His arm flexed as tension rose in his body, his composure now unraveling. Olivia recognized the signs. His breathing was shallow, jaw clenched, all markers of a man about to act on emotion, not reason. She glanced at the dashboard. Her phone was still mounted and recording, the tiny red light blinking steadily. She spoke clearly. Each word deliberate. I want you to know this entire interaction is being recorded. Every word, every move. If you're acting within your rights, you shouldn't be concerned. Monroe's eyes darted to the phone. He noticed the camera. Something flickered behind his glare, maybe doubt, maybe fear, but he puffed his chest and growled. You think that camera's gonna scare me? Olivia didn't respond. Instead, she calmly adjusted the phone to keep him in full view. Her hands remained visible, palms up on the wheel, a universal sign of non-aggression. She wasn't hiding anything. She wasn't armed. She wasn't resisting. I'm not provoking you, she said evenly. I'm requesting fairness. If you cannot provide legal cause for this stop, then your orders are unlawful, and I will not comply with unlawful orders. A gust of wind swept across the road, rustling the side mirrors and whistling through the partially cracked window. The tension was palpable now, dense and volatile. Olivia could feel it, the fragile line between control and collapse. And that line, she knew, could vanish with a single word or a single wrong move. What do you think Olivia should do in such a tense situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Stories Around Us would love to know how you might respond if you were in her place. And now, let's continue with the next part of the story. In a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the air between them, one, a representative of the state, and the other, a citizen demanding dignity, froze in place. And then, suddenly, the freeze shattered. Rick Monroe moved his hand from the flashlight to his belt, not to pull out a citation pad, but to draw his gun. In one swift, practiced motion, the black steel handgun came out of its holster and pointed directly through the open window, the barrel glinting in the streetlight, aimed straight at Olivia Carter's chest. I told you, get out of the car. Now, he shouted, his voice hoarse, ragged with fury and panic. Olivia could hear her heart pounding in her ears. The fear that surged wasn't because she was fragile, far from it. But this was the first time in her life that a gun was being pointed at her chest by someone wearing the uniform of the law. She had faced terrorist threats overseas, stared down extremists in underground bunkers, but this was different. This wasn't war. This was home. Her hands stayed on the wheel, palms open and visible the universal posture of non-threat. "Officer Monroe," she said slowly, each word sharp and deliberate. "You're crossing a line. You have no legal grounds. Lower your weapon. Right now." Monroe's hand trembled not from cold, but from internal chaos. His finger hovered near the trigger. The unwavering calm in Olivia's voice, even with a gun aimed at her, seemed to rattle him. He shouted again. "Louder. You think you're better than me? I'm the cop here. I give the orders. You don't listen. I make you listen." But Olivia didn't retreat. She didn't even blink. Instead, she inhaled deeply and locked eyes with him, holding that gaze steady, a silent message that said, "I see you. I won't be intimidated, but I also won't let you murder me in silence. I'm Deputy Director Olivia Carter of the National Security Bureau," she stated clearly, "and I am being threatened, at gunpoint, by a law enforcement officer without cause. This is all being recorded. I'm calling your superior. Right now." Monroe flinched. He hadn't known who she was. Not until now. Not until her title, her power cut through the tension like a siren. But even so, he didn't lower the weapon. Not yet. Olivia knew that one twitch, one wrong breath, could tip this into tragedy. She began to reach for her phone. Slowly, no sudden moves, no sharp gestures. Every inch of her motion was deliberate, rehearsed, controlled, like a survival drill. "I'm making a call to your supervisor," she said firmly. "Everything is still recording. If you shoot me, this will not be buried." Monroe didn't stop her. Maybe a part of him buried under the panic and bluster realized he had gone too far. Olivia tapped her phone. 2 rings. Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. "This is Captain Morales," came a low, steady male voice. "This is Deputy Director Olivia Carter, National Security Bureau," she said without hesitation. Her eyes never left Monroe's trembling weapon. "I'm being threatened by Officer Rick Monroe on Canyon Road, near mile marker 17. He has drawn his firearm on me without cause. I've committed no violation. Everything is being recorded. I need immediate assistance." There was a pause, short, but sharp. "Copy that. Units en route. Do not move. We're coming to you," Morales replied, his voice shifting into command mode. Olivia ended the call but left the phone recording. All she needed now was time and the focus to survive these next few minutes. The barrel of Monroe's gun still hovered, and death felt as close as the cold wind slipping through the cracked window. But Olivia was still breathing, still calm, still unbroken. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance like thunder rolling over the quiet valley. Olivia heard it clearer than anything else, not because it was loud, but because it was hope. That sound was confirmation she wasn't alone. Truth was coming, and it was bringing light to break through the dark. Rick Monroe still stood outside the vehicle, gun drawn and pointed at her. But his eyes had started to shift. His hand trembled. The confidence of a man in control had faded, replaced by something else, fear. Not of Olivia, but of the truth she had just named. Olivia held her position, both hands still calmly placed on the steering wheel, eyes forward. When headlights swept across the road and a black sheriff's SUV skidded to a halt behind Monroe's patrol car, Her chest loosened, not out of relief, but readiness. The battlefield had changed. The SUV came to a stop with a spray of dust and gravel. The door slammed open. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, his movements sharp and authoritative. His graying hair and crisp uniform bore the rank of Captain Morales, the gold stripes on his shoulder gleaming beneath the streetlight. Morales marched directly toward Monroe, not even glancing at Olivia. His eyes locked onto the scene, a subordinate with his weapon drawn on a seated, unarmed civilian, a woman who had not raised her voice, not raised her hand, not raised a single threat, and yet had a gun aimed at her chest. Monroe Morales shouted, his voice slicing through the night. "Drop that weapon now!" Monroe jerked back as if slapped. His hand shook violently as he lowered the gun, then stepped back in confusion. His face had gone pale. "Sir, she refused to comply. She was filming me. She said she'd report me to the FBI or something." Morales raised a hand, cutting him off. Then he turned to Olivia, his voice lowering but no less firm. "Ma'am, are you Deputy Director Carter?" "Yes," Olivia replied, eyes still on Monroe. "I asked repeatedly for a reason. He gave me none. He yelled, threatened, and eventually aimed a gun at my chest. All of it's on video." She nodded toward the phone on her dashboard, the red recording light still blinking steadily. Morales gave a short nod, his expression unreadable, but his jaw was clenched tight. "That's all I need to hear." He signaled to the two deputies who had exited the SUV with him. One approached and took the gun from Monroe's hand with care. The other stepped in to secure the weapon and lead him away. Monroe didn't resist, but he mumbled, desperation creeping into his tone. "I didn't know who she was." "She didn't say?" "I thought you didn't need to know who she was to do your job right." Morales cut him off coldly. "She's a citizen. That's all that should have mattered. You're suspended immediately, pending full investigation." Olivia said nothing more. She didn't need to. Morales approached her window, his tone softening just enough to show recognition, but not condescension. "I apologize. Deputy Director Carter. Would you prefer to give your statement now or in the morning?" Olivia met his eyes. "I'll send you the video within the hour. But I want this handled by the book. Not because I work in national security. Because if this had been a teacher, a nurse, or a college student, they would have deserved justice just the same." Morales nodded. "You have my word. This will not be swept under the rug." Olivia finally exhaled, a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. A weight had been lifted, but she knew it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Just hours after Olivia Carter submitted the footage of the incident to the sheriff's office, a ripple began to spread slow at first, then accelerating like wildfire across still water. The next morning, when she walked into the Denver headquarters of the National Security Bureau, the atmosphere was noticeably different. Her colleagues didn't look at her with the usual professional nods or passing greetings. Instead, their eyes carried something heavier, the weight of knowing, of witnessing injustice in real time. By 10, the local news broke the story. One anchor's voice was steady but unmistakably disturbed. A senior national security official was threatened at gunpoint by a local police officer during a questionable traffic stop. Sources confirmed the encounter was recorded on video. Within minutes, social media exploded. Platforms like X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit were flooded with commentary, outrage, and solidarity. The hashtag Justice for Olivia began trending across Colorado and then nationwide. People started sharing their own stories. unjust stops, suspicious glances, the quiet humiliations of being perceived as out of place. But this time, the target wasn't just a nameless civilian. This was a woman who had led intelligence teams, advised cabinet members, and debriefed agents fresh off foreign missions, and yet, driving home on an ordinary road in Colorado, she wasn't safe from bias. Olivia remained silent in the media storm. She declined every interview CNN, NPR, even personal requests from respected journalists. Instead, she focused on facts. In a closed-door meeting with Jefferson County's internal affairs team, she provided everything: the dashcam video, the audio of her 911 call, her written testimony, each detail precise, each moment documented. "I'm not here for special treatment," she said, eyes steady across the table. "I'm here for transparency. Not because of who I am, but because this could have happened to anyone." Emails began trickling in, some from law enforcement, some anonymous. A female officer wrote, "I was stopped in uniform once and still forced to prove I was legit. I never spoke up. You spoke for all of us, but not everyone offered support." On certain corners of the internet, anonymous posts accused Olivia of provoking the officer, obstructing protocol, or using her position to cause a scene. Yet the video spoke louder than any spin. The footage was clear, calm voice, still hands, flashing barrel of a gun, no raised voice, no aggression. Just a black woman, sitting in her car, being punished for asking why. 3 weeks later, the internal investigation concluded. The report was nearly 80 pages long, and its findings were damning. Officer Rick Monroe had no legal basis for the stop, no probable cause, and no exigent circumstances. Drawing his weapon was deemed a severe abuse of power, a violation of ethical standards, and influenced by racial bias. The Civilian Oversight Board recommended criminal prosecution, as well as permanent decertification from all law enforcement agencies. The district attorney agreed. Charges were filed. A court date was set in Denver. When the news dropped, hundreds of protesters gathered outside the courthouse. Signs read, "No one is above the law, and being black is not probable cause." But Olivia wasn't among them. She didn't need to stand with signs. She had stood firm on the side of the road, unarmed, calm, and unwavering, and the world had seen enough. The official trial began at the Denver City Courthouse in a session that was anything but quiet. From early morning, hundreds gathered outside its gates, some holding signs that read, "No one is above the law. Black women deserve safety. And I could be Olivia." Inside, the courtroom was packed, reporters squeezed into the back rows. A few uniformed officers sat quietly, not to serve, but to observe. Activists, civil rights attorneys, law students, and everyday citizens filled the benches. No one spoke loudly, but the atmosphere was dense with tension. Every eye was fixed on the defendant, Rick Monroe, a former police officer once trusted to serve and protect. Monroe sat motionless at the defense table, his face pale, his gray suit wrinkled. His lawyer, a seasoned middle-aged man, tried to craft a narrative of a stressed officer, a misjudged situation, and no malicious intent. But the video, played on a large screen at the front of the courtroom, told a different story. The footage was crystal clear, Olivia sitting upright, hands on the steering wheel, her voice calm and deliberate as she asked for a lawful reason for the stop. Monroe responded with hostility, repeatedly shouting things like, "I don't need a reason. Get out, or I'll drag you out." And finally, the moment his gun was drawn, pointed squarely at her chest, every second captured, every word preserved. Gasps rippled through the room. One elderly man shook his head in silence. Then Olivia took the stand. She walked to the witness box in a navy blue suit, her hair neatly pinned back, her expression composed but resolute. She spoke clearly, recounting the events of that night in steady detail. I followed every traffic law. I used my signal. I drove the speed limit. I asked for a legal explanation for why I was pulled over. Instead of an answer, I was met with threats, shouting, and eventually a gun aimed at my chest. The defense attorney tried to push back, suggesting she may have escalated the situation by questioning authority, or that recording the encounter was provocative. Olivia didn't waver. I didn't yell. I didn't insult him. I didn't move suddenly. I asked a question, and I recorded the interaction. Both are my legal rights. He didn't stop me because I broke the law. He stopped me because of who he thought I was, someone he could control. Her words echoed in the courtroom like a bell ringing in solemn clarity. The jury listened intently. Some jotted notes. Others simply nodded. The truth no longer needed to be uncovered. It only needed to be acknowledged. After 5 days of testimony and hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. The room fell silent. The judge asked, "Has the jury reached a decision?" "Yes, Your Honor. The defendant, Rick Monroe, is found guilty on all counts of abuse of authority, endangerment of an unarmed citizen, and violation of anti-discrimination conduct policy. The sentence, 3 years in prison, no parole, and a lifetime ban from all law enforcement positions." Monroe lowered his head as the bailiffs cuffed him. The courtroom stirred. A few applauded softly. Others wept. Olivia remained still. It wasn't triumph she felt, not pride, just the quiet gravity of someone who had walked through a fire many never returned from and lived to tell the truth. The moment the verdict was read closed one chapter of the story, but do you think justice was truly served? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe a sentence can ever truly heal the wounds left by injustice? When Olivia Carter stepped out of the Denver courthouse that afternoon, sunlight hit the pavement like a quiet blessing. She walked steadily past rows of reporters and cameras, through a sea of waiting eyes. In front of her stood a wall of microphones, ready to capture her first words that carried more than personal relief. They carried responsibility. She stopped just beyond the courthouse steps and looked out at the crowd. Her voice rang out not with anger, not with tears, but with a clear, unshakable strength forged through decades of holding the line. I stand here today not because I am a deputy director of a national security agency. I stand here because I am a citizen. I'm a mother, a neighbor, a Black woman in America, and I could not stay silent when the system we are told to trust turns its back on the very people it is supposed to protect. I survived, but too many others don't. Her words were broadcast live across television networks. On social media, the response was immediate, not just outrage this time, but resolve. People were no longer just watching. They were organizing. In the days that followed, Olivia didn't retreat into her office. She didn't resume her quiet life. Instead, she launched a public campaign for reform, not as a victim, but as a strategist who understood the power of policy. She met with lawmakers across Colorado, in long, tense meetings at the state capitol. She presented detailed proposals for mandatory body cameras for all law enforcement officers, regular psychological evaluations for active duty police, bias and de-escalation training that went beyond checkboxes and reached hearts, stronger authority for independent civilian oversight boards. She also began speaking directly with communities at schools, churches, and civic centers. At one meeting held in the basement of a church in Aurora, a grandmother stood with trembling hands and said, "My grandson is 17. Every time he bikes home after dark, he's afraid of the police lights. He shouldn't have to live like that. No child should. Olivia sat still for a moment, then gently took the woman's hand and nodded. I promise I won't stop. 6 months later, the Carter Reform Act passed in the Colorado State Legislature, a sweeping bill mandating transparency in traffic stops, strengthening civilian oversight, and requiring accountability in every department across the state. At the bill's signing ceremony, the governor glanced toward Olivia, seated in the front row. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply nodded, not in triumph, but in quiet acknowledgement. This was only the beginning. A few weeks after the Carter Reform Act officially went into effect, a quiet afternoon unfolded in Olivia Carter's office at NSB headquarters. Outside the tall windows, snow began to fall softly on the rooftops of Denver, the first signs of winter gently dusting the city. Her desk, usually a scene of controlled order, was covered in reform proposals, speaking invitations, policy drafts. But at the center of it all sat a small white envelope, unmarked by postal stamps. It bore only a simple inscription, to Ms. Olivia Carter, the one who was braver than the courtroom. She opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten in uneven blue ink. The words were imperfect but sincere, in a way that needed no polish. My name is Malik. I'm 15. I watched your trial on YouTube because our history teacher asked us to study people who changed the law without using guns. I didn't think that person would be someone like you just sitting in a car, speaking calmly, but making the whole country listen. I used to think that if the police ever stopped me someday, I should just stay quiet and take it. But now I know that's not right. I don't need to shout, but I shouldn't bow my head either. You showed me that being respected is a right, not a reward. I don't know what I want to be yet, but I want to do something like you so that someone else can lift their head too. Thank you for not being afraid. Thank you for not being silent. Olivia finished reading the letter and folded it slowly, with the care reserved for something sacred, as if it were not paper, but proof of the most meaningful act she'd ever done. Not the classified missions, not the briefings, but this reaching a young mind and changing how he saw himself in the world. She gazed out the window. Snow now blanketed the streets. That same road, the one where it had all happened nearly a year ago, was buried in white. It seemed so quiet now, so still, but she knew the echoes of what happened there would carry for years to come. Olivia reached for a fresh sheet of paper and wrote one simple sentence in reply to Malik. If you can stand up when the world expects you to bow down, you are already stronger than most grown men. She sealed the envelope and placed it on the edge of her desk. Ready for mailing, then rose and walked to her next meeting. On a quiet spring afternoon, sunlight filtered gently over the suburban streets of Denver. The trees were beginning to bloom again after a long winter, and the breeze carried the faint scent of flowering plum trees. Along Canyon Road, once calm, then forever changed by a single night, a sleek black hybrid sedan glided silently along the shoulder. Behind the wheel sat Olivia Carter. No flashing lights, no sirens, just the steady pulse of streetlights, picket fences, and ordinary life. She had returned to the place that had once redefined not just her career, but her very purpose. But this time, she hadn't come to relive it. She had come to affirm that she had made it through, that she had faced the storm, and survived. She eased the car to a stop at the shoulder, the very same patch of gravel where she had once been ordered out at gunpoint. She turned off the engine, sat in silence, Her hands rested gently on her lap, now no longer gripping the wheel like a lifeline. From here, she could see everything: the worn 35 MEP sign to her left, the weathered white fence across the road, and the faint tire marks etched into the gravel. Everything still looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Because Olivia had changed, and because of her, the system had started to change too. From a solitary act demanding dignity, she had reached millions. From a moment that could have ended in gunfire, she created a movement of voices, not screams, not slogans, but voices rooted in reason, courage, and the quiet truth that justice is not built on fear. It is built on relentless resolve. She picked up her phone and read once more the letter from Malik. Then she set it down and smiled, not out of pride, but purpose. Sometimes, the greatest victories aren't won in courtrooms, they're found in the hearts that awaken because of you. In the youth who realize that silence isn't safety, silence is the surrender of the right to live freely. Olivia started the engine again. The soft hum filled the cabin like a breath exhaled. She glanced once in the rearview mirror at the road behind her, familiar and still. Then she looked forward toward the road ahead. This time, she knew she wasn't walking it alone. Olivia Carter's story isn't just about a wrongful traffic stop or a headline-making trial. It's a reminder that courage doesn't always roar sometimes. It's the quiet strength to stand firm in the face of fear. And justice, if it ends in a courtroom, isn't enough. It must continue through action, reform, and unwavering belief in what's right. How did this story make you feel? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because you're part of a conversation that's redefining what fairness means in today's world. Don't forget to subscribe to Stories Around Us for more powerful stories that move hearts and open eyes, where every small detail can spark a wave of change.